Okay, so we are recording. Hello, everyone. My name's Aubree Lynn, and I am the secretary for the Laramie Artists Project. And today, I'm interviewing Mimi Fenton. Did I pronounce that right?
Yes,
Okay. She's a participating artist in our 2020 online Touchstone exhibition. And how are you doing today, Mimi?
I'm doing great and I'm happy and honored to be here. Thanks.
Wonderful. So, my first question for you is can you talk a little bit about your medium?
I paint only in oils and I paint on large canvases because I can't paint on small canvases. I started painting on the smaller canvases when I first started, and then I had a good teacher and mentor who said, just don't do that anymore. There's nothing about you that says you should be painting on small canvases. And so I find though now that no canvas is quite big enough. It's really, it's, so I just do oils and I just do oil on canvas.
So, have you found that through using oil, I wonder if could you talk a little bit about that process of painting on the bigger canvas and why that's why that appeals to you so much? Is it just like
Well,
filling up space is like really therapeutic or?
Well, it is sort of that, and also even so, now that I've moved into figurative paintings, none of my figures are able to even fit on the canvas, and so I feel like even if the canvases get bigger, well, then the figures will get bigger. But part of what I'm trying to do, sort of stylistically, is be sure that all the canvases are cropped, or I mean, all of the characters are cropped within a canvas, so they never quite fit. And I think it's just symbolically that not being able to fit into a certain space and always feeling a little bit cramped, and less so in Wyoming where there's so much space. But also, it's wonderfully liberating to be able to see things almost telescopically, and I think it's just natural. It's not. It's just how I see things. That when once I start drawing, and I draw on, I do sketches first and then I draw on the canvas. And I'm always surprised. I'll have a perfectly, a perfect composition that fits on the sketches, and everything in it is in its place. And then once I start getting on that canvas, half the composition goes away and it's narrowed down into something. So I'm not sure. I had a mentor once who said, you can't help but when you're painting, you can't help but be yourself. Like you can't escape yourself. So whatever inadequacy it is in me, there it is on the canvas. So
That's lovely. So I guess you kind of touched on this a little bit, but can you talk a little bit about your studio practice because you're a full-time professor and everything online? How is your studio practice kind of fitting into your daily life?
I think that's such a wonderful question because I have a little studio at the Civic Center, which I love going to, and I'm always inspired to paint. I never don't want to paint, and I never have to force myself. Oh, I should be at the studio. My challenge is finding time, and I don't need big gobs of time. If I have an hour, I want to be there because something's always churning in my head that I want to do. But because I am teaching full time still. I'm a literature professor. It's hard, and so what I try to do is, just compact my work week into, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, as much as I can, and work 14 hours a day or so. Then I have to detox a little bit, and then get to the studio when I can, and then I can really focus a little bit. But then it's hard to come back into that other, business teaching world. So I just get there when I can, and I'm always writing ideas down, or I take a picture of my whatever I'm working on. I'm usually working on two things at once, and I take pictures of what I've done, and then I've always got it on my phone, and I look at it, and I have also some notes on my camera, a note app, and I'll say, fix that poor woman's hand, or, those eyes are way too big, or add some blue to the left. So I can always refer to it, and I always have it sort of with me so that when I go into the studio, since my time is limited, I can have done my kind of critique, even though it's not in the studio itself. So I feel like I just keep the engines running all the time if I can.
That's a really clever process. I haven't heard of that before. So, as far as your work for this exhibition, particularly, was there a certain theme, or kind of how did you approach making the work for this exhibition?
Well, it doesn't have a theme, but all of my work, because I have been a literature professor for a long time, evolves in some way from my connection to literature. So I'm a Milton scholar. I taught Paradise Lost, or still teach it, for 30 something years. And so and I read poetry all of the time. And so a lot of the works evolve out of connections to poetry. And so I was working on a series for a while on Paradise Lost, not trying to illustrate it, but trying to paint. There are certain moments in the text that really have always stuck with me, and I've been trying to interpret them in part as a 21st century woman, a 17th century text. And so I was doing a series of Paradise Lost paintings, and then COVID hit, and I'm a long way from home. My daughters live, far, far away. And we had a deal that we were gonna, and I'm divorced, and so we were gonna see each other every 2 months. And we had our plans laid out for the next, forever. And then COVID hit. And so I started thinking, like, how do I find my way back home? And what does home mean? And where is home? And I love it here. And I've lived here for a little while, but it's getting to be home. So I started doing, very literally, I put some maps down. I thought, okay, just way too literal, but I put some maps down on some canvases of all the places that I've lived before. And I've traveled all over the world. And so I put maps down. I thought that will be a kind of underpainting for me, to guide me to think about this idea of home. And so some of the paintings in the series or in the show are from a series called Maps to Home. And it's very difficult to see the textures and to see the actual maps in those paintings, but they're there. And then I would paint the figures and then scrape them away so that the places become a part of the characters. So there's a young woman in one, and her coat is made of maps, and where she's sitting is made of maps, and then she's looking ahead. And that one's called I Can't Find My Way Back Home. That was at the beginning in March. And then there's another one where I think it's probably a self-portrait of me at 100 years old, where I have all these maps again, and it's an old woman looking out the window, and it's a quote from a poem, a Rumi poem, and it says, "There's always 1,000 ways to go home again." And so I thought, it's looking back through time, that there's always a way to get home, if home is a part literally of what you are and who you are. So that's what those are about. And then there's some Paradise Lost paintings in there as well. Mhm.
That's so beautiful, because I think the written word and kind of there's so many different kinds of art, and that blending of both literature and visual art in your work, that's really exciting, and I think it's really beautiful. And the thought of home is so relevant right now with
Mhm.
some of us. I mean, we're all, there's this weird parallel of we're trapped in our homes, but we're missing home. And that's a very appropriate body of work to be making currently. um,
Thank you. Yeah.
what how do you see your work affecting the viewer, or how do you want it to speak to your viewer?
I love that question, in part because I think when we're in the process of creating, it's, for me at least, it's such an internal thing. And I have to, I meditate before I start. Like, I have to cross to the other side, wherever that is. And then it's just about being like inside that canvas, and how how it's working or evolving. And so the viewer seems to come in later, but I feel I'm being too long-winded, but at the beginning of the process, I think, okay, for me, art, my painting, I just want it to matter. I just want to understand what it means to be a human being. And I like to look at pretty things, and I have noticed that some of my recent art, it looks like I'm a very glum person. I'm not. I'm just exploring. I'm not a dark person. You know, for a while I just painted about joy and all of that, but my heart is not full of joy right now. It tries to be, but it's exploring things like, what does it mean to not be home, and you know, how do we find our way, all of that. And so I think I want the viewer to be able to connect with that part of our humanity, and to somehow to look at themselves. And so if if in a figure, it's a universal figure. It might be very particular. It's a particular face, but that face is also all of us, that everyone can see themselves somewhere in that situation or in that posture, sitting there dejected, or sitting there surly, or sitting there contemplative. I don't know why I'm doing sitting people now, but because we're being fairly still right now. So it's sort of coming out in those postures, but being able to connect and find some meaning as they look and fall into it themselves, hopefully.
Yeah, so almost like a mirror of sorts.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, exactly, exactly. Yeah, that it reflects on something within them that touches emotions, because that, for me, that's what literature does.
Mhm.
So this is just a visual relative of all of that.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. My
Okay.
phone just went off. Um, yeah, I think that's really, it's something we all need right now. I think everybody's feeling pretty isolated and alone, but we're all having this common experience. Um,
Right. And that isolation, I think, as I was looking at like when I thinking back on the paintings, I just paint what whatever the inspiration is, whatever the text that gets me inspired, or the emotion. But I realize all my paintings are these solitary figures right now. And I just started a new painting where there's two characters and they're actually laughing. And I thought, and they're just two old women, and it reminds me of myself and a friend, just when something cracks you up. And I thought that's where we're going maybe now, is trying to find the moments of joy in the midst of all of this.
well, and I think I wish you joy. I know you're going to see your daughters
Yeah,
tomorrow.
tomorrow morning I'm going to leave.
So,
Yeah.
well,
Um,
please be safe and enjoy them and enjoy that feeling of home.
Thank you. I thank you. This is feeling like home, but I do feel like, I lived in North Carolina for almost 30 years. So being back there will be nice, especially for my daughter's wedding, though I'm
Yeah.
not, yeah, a
Well,
little nervous.
well, tell your daughter congratulations for us.
Thank you.
And
And
I hope you have a wonderful time. And I'm really excited to see your work up in the exhibition.
well,
Um,
thank you. Thank
well,
you
you
so
have
much.
a wonderful day, Mimi.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time, and thanks for all that you're doing.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.